Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Wednesday, October 15th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The high in Riverside today is 67.5 degrees, with a low of 55.1, making for a comfortably cool fall day perfect for a brisk walk. Coming up, we'll examine the reasons the Supreme Court is revisiting a key challenge to the Voting Rights Act, and break down how the ongoing Kaiser Permanente strike is endangering healthcare access across California. Plus, we'll touch on other developing stories from around the nation and beyond. All this and more on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Good morning, folks. We're starting today with a crucial development at the Supreme Court that's drawing lines in the sand for voting rights across America. Today marks the rare re-argument in the case of Louisiana versus Calais, a Republican-led challenge to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Joining me to break this down is our justice correspondent, Ethan. Ethan, take us through what's at stake here.
Thanks, Grace. Absolutely, this is no small snakes in the grass situation. Section 2 of the 1965 Voting Rights Act is the key provision that bans racial discrimination in voting and redistricting, ensuring minorities have a fair shot at electing representatives who look like them and share their views. According to reporting from ABC News, in an Associated Press article by Mark Sherman, published just after midnight today, the court's conservative majority is wrestling with whether creating race-conscious districts to follow this law violates the 14th Amendment's equal protection or the 15th Amendment's voting guarantees.
I see. For our viewers unfamiliar, can you explain the history of this act and why Section 2 matters so much, especially after past court decisions?
Sure thing. The Voting Rights Act came out of the civil rights movement to smash Jim Crow barriers that kept black voters from the polls. Section 2 is its permanent nationwide hammer against practices that dilute minority votes based on race, color, or language status. Unlike Section 5, which required federal preclearance for changes in voting laws, Section 2 lets folks file lawsuits if discrimination happens. But the Supreme Court neutered Section 5 in the 2013 Shelby County v. Holder ruling, written by Chief Justice John Roberts, as detailed in SCOTUS blog analyses. That left Section 2 as the main shield.
And how do courts decide if there's a violation in redistricting, Ethan? I've heard of these Gingell's tests.
Spot on. It's the three Gingell's preconditions from the 1986 Thornburg v. Gingell's case. First, the minority group needs to be large and compact enough for a majority-minority district. Second, they must vote cohesively for their preferred candidates. Third, the white majority has to vote as a bloc to usually beat those candidates. The 1982 amendments made it clear you don't need to prove bad intent, just that the practice results in diluted votes, harming the chance to participate equally. Importantly, as the NAACP Legal Defense Fund explained in their briefs this month, Section 2 doesn't demand proportional representation, like quotas for seats matching population shares. Nothing in the law says minorities get seats equal to their percent in the population. It's about opportunity, not guaranteed wins.
Got it. Now, zooming in on Louisiana's mess, what sparked this lawsuit and why the fuss over that second black majority district?
It all ties to Louisiana's post-2020 census redistricting. In 2022, the GOP-controlled legislature mapped 6 districts, 5 white majority Republican strongholds, and 1 black majority Democratic seat, even though black residents make up about 33% of the population. Groups like the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and Power Coalition sued in Robinson v. Landry, claiming it packed black voters into one spot and cracked others to weaken their power. Federal courts agreed it likely broke Section 2. So in January 2024, they rushed Senate Bill 8, adding a second black majority district, number 6. But oh boy, it's a doozy.
Snake-like? That sounds like it could twist the whole political map. So challengers jumped in?
Exactly, playing on those twists. White and non-black voters sued in Calais versus Landry, saying the bill put race above basics like compactness and communities of interest, breaching the 14th Amendment. A federal panel ruled it wasn't narrowly tailored, with race as the top factor. The Supreme Court paused that for 2024 elections, but called for today's re-argument on whether intentionally making a second majority-minority district violates the Constitution. Trial records from Robinson and Calais show at least 11 alternative maps that were more compact, meeting Gingles without the weird shapes, as noted in the 2023 Allen v. Milligan ruling and NAACP Legal Defense Fund filings cited by Democracy Docket today.
Interesting. And Louisiana's defense? Is politics sneaking in here?
They claim it wasn't just race, it protected GOP incumbents like Speaker Mike Johnson and Representative Julia Letlow while targeting others. Governor Jeff Landry and Republicans flipped sides after the re-argument order, pushing a colorblind rule that bans race in VRA fixes, per analyses from the Center for American Progress and The Guardian today. Critics see this as a GOP ploy, with conservative activists recruiting plaintiffs as proxies, according to CBS News, The Grio, and Slate via SCOTUS blog. It's part of a strategy, egged on by President Trump, for mid-decade remaps in places like Texas to lock in House control.
What did today's arguments reveal? And who's signaling what from the bench?
Transcripts aren't out yet, but previews from SCOTUS blog, PBS.org, and Balls and Strikes say the court is balancing Section 2 remedies against equal protection. Louisiana argues race-based districts are flat-out unconstitutional, clashing with the 14th Amendment. Defenders, including black voters and the Justice Department, say VRA compliance is a must under the 15th, as in the 5-4 Allen v. Milligan decision, where Roberts and Kavanaugh sided with liberals. Justice Thomas skipped re-argument, calling the Constitution supreme. Conservatives like Alito, Gorsuch, and Barrett question race's role, with Gorsuch noting ignored compact options. Liberals defend Gingles, stressing dilution proof.
Big picture, Ethan, how could this ripple out, especially with elections looming?
Huge stakes. A win for challengers, expected by late June or early July next year, about 8 to 9 months away per SCOTUS blog and oyas.org. Could nix race-conscious VRA maps in Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and more, netting Republicans 5 to 10 House seats by the Brennan Center's estimate. It'd amp up post-Shelby voter suppression, slashing minority and Democratic voices. The ACLU and League of Women Voters call it a VRA rollback. Republicans say it stops racial gerrymandering per National Review. Echoes the 2023 affirmative action end in Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, pushing colorblindness. After Shelby and Rucho versus Common Cause in 2019, which okayed partisan gerrymandering, Section 2 is the last big check, warns the Brennan Center in a pre-argument report via SCOTUS blog today. NPR and the Washington Post note this tests Allen versus Milligan's limits, potentially defining voting rights for a generation, as the NAACP Legal Defense Fund puts it. Mid-decade pushes in Texas heighten the drama for 2026 midterms.
Ooh, that's a lot to unpack, Ethan. Thanks for shedding light on these high court hijinks.
My pleasure, Grace.
Good morning, everyone. We're turning now to a story that's hitting close to home for so many Californians, especially with healthcare being such a vital part of our daily lives. The massive strike at Kaiser Permanente is in its second day, disrupting services across the state and beyond. Joining me from the studio to break it all down is our healthcare reporter, Chloe. Chloe, this feels like a real prescription for chaos in patient care, doesn't it?
Absolutely, Grace. You're spot on with that health pun. As of this morning, October 15, 2025, about 31,000 registered nurses and frontline workers have been on strike for 24 hours now. It kicked off at 7 a.m. yesterday and is scheduled to wrap up at 7 a.m. on October 19th, so 4 more days to go. This is one of the biggest labor actions in U.S. healthcare this year, according to reporting from the Associated Press via Wink News on October 14th. Kaiser serves over 12.6 million members, mostly in California with 40 hospitals and hundreds of medical offices, so it's no small affair.
That's staggering. Can you explain who exactly is walking the picket lines and why they're doing it?
Sure, Grace. The strikers aren't just nurses. It's a whole team of essential pros, including nurse anesthetists, pharmacists, midwives, physician assistants, rehab therapists, speech-language pathologists, and dietitians. In California, from Oakland to San Diego, they're protesting wages that haven't kept up with inflation, up 18.5% since their last contract in 2021, where they only got a 2% raise in the first year. The union, UNAC/UHCP, wants a 25% wage hike over 4 years. That's about 6.25% a year. Plus enforceable staffing ratios based on how sick patients are, and more say in care decisions, like an on-call registry to ditch pricey traveling contractors. As the Los Angeles Times reported on October 15th, chronic understaffing is putting patient safety at risk and burning out workers.
And what about in other states? Is this California-only drama?
Not at all. Picketing is happening at around 500 facilities in California, Hawaii, and Oregon, and it's grown to involve up to 46,000 workers from the broader alliance of healthcare unions. In Oregon and Southwest Washington, nearly 4,000 workers from groups like the Oregon Federation of Nurses and Health Professionals are demanding an extra 27% market adjustment in year one, which could mean over 50% total raises. Oregon Public Broadcasting covered that on October 15th, noting it's their biggest action in 50 years for UNAC/UHCP.
Kaiser's a powerhouse, though. How are they responding to these demands?
Kaiser Permanente, the Oakland-based not-for-profit with $115.8 billion in operating revenues last year, is offering a 21.5% wage increase over 4 years, averaging 5.375% annually. They call it generous, saying it'd pump nearly $2 billion into their $6.3 billion payroll by 2029. According to their official statement on October 15th, via CBS News, union workers already earn 16% more than at other providers, with registered nurses averaging $125,000 to $140,000 a year in high-cost spots like California and Hawaii. Pharmacists get $126,000 to $179,000, midwives around $142,514, and therapists $63,000 to $64,000. But the union says that's 7% below market when you factor in inflation, per nurse.org on October 15th using ZipRecruiter and PayScale data.
Interesting. How does that stack up against competitors?
At rivals like Sutter Health in California, RNs earn $92,000 to $162,000 annually, averaging $134,000 to $142,000, as the LA Times detailed on October 15th with Zippia and PayScale figures. Dignity Health is around $94,000 to $115,000, Providence $88,000 to $101,000. Unions point to Kaiser's deep pockets, $12.9 billion in net income last year, including $5.5 billion from investments, and a $6.8 billion acquisition boost via Resant Health, plus $66 billion in reserves, way above California's tangible net equity rules, according to Fierce Healthcare and Becker's Hospital Review on October 15th. Kaiser counters that much is tied up in $3.7 billion for seismic upgrades and tech, plus pensions and bonds, from their audited financials via Moody's and S&P reports.
Negotiations sound tense. Any progress?
They've been talking since May after contracts expired September 30th, with Kaiser claiming 52 tentative deals with 17 of 54 local unions and offering mediation. But talks stalled, as Healthcare Dive reported yesterday, with no breakthroughs by last evening. Workers in Roseville, Bakersfield, and Portland are holding firm against unsafe workloads, per San Jose Inside and World Socialist website on October 15th. The actions focused on these 5 days, no extension hints yet from Courthouse News Service.
What about the real-world hits to patients?
Impacts are big in California, where Kaiser's king. Hospitals and ERs stay open 24/7, staffed by docs, managers, 7,600 temps, many from Kaiser itself, and over 1,000 reassigned staff. but elective surgeries and procedures are postponed. Therapies shifting virtual via phone, video, or e-chat. Pharmacies mostly run, especially north, where local pharmacists aren't striking, with mail order pushed. Labs in Oregon have limits, so pre-strike test advisories. Closures hit 3 Northern California therapy spots: Sacramento Downtown Commons Spine Center, Milpitas Medical Offices, San Francisco Mission Bay, rerouting services, as SF Gate noted. In Hawaii, 3 hospitals like Mauna Lua on Oahu and Maui adjust similarly per Big Island now. Oregon spots in Portland and Bend have pickets but keep going, via Oregon Public Broadcasting and the Columbian. Kaiser says don't cancel, they'll notify, but it's straining vulnerable folks, as the Sacramento Bee and Central Oregon Daily News covered.
This isn't isolated, right? Part of a bigger wave in healthcare labor?
Definitely a stormy season for strikes. Over a dozen major ones in 2025, echoing pay and staffing fights. 5,000 nurses at Stanford and Packard struck one day in April. 20,000 UC workers, including nurses, walked out February to May over layoffs. Ongoing at Henry Ford Genesis since September 1st, and Mercy Health in Wisconsin for a month, per nurse.org and LAist on October 15th. One-dayers hit West Anaheim August 12th, Ascension St. Agnes July 24th, UC San Diego Health in July, all for ratios and retention, as Becker's Hospital Review said. Unity Point's 5-day strike ended June 1st with pay gains. Geisinger's 800 nurses struck 5 days in February, via fiscal note. This one's scale dwarfs them, multi-state too, potentially setting benchmarks, CBS News notes. Wages grew 4.7% yearly overall from 2020 to 2025, but RNs just 1.5% pre-2022, before a 7% spike, eroded by 22.7% inflation. Pharmacists under 3% average. Unions 6.25% beats the 2023 SEIU-UHW deal at 5.25%, but matches inflation offsets and a 7% pay gap, per health system tracker, Mercer via Incredible Health, SEIU-UHW, and Times Union. In California, medical costs beat general inflation by 0.3%, so this could reshape affordability, as Visual Capitalist put it, San Francisco Chronicle and Voice of OC2.
Wow, Chloe, you've painted a full picture of this healthcare showdown. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. Jobs jitters are tilting the scales at the Federal Reserve. Chair Jerome Powell says a sharp slowdown in hiring is now a growing risk to the U.S. economy, shifting the balance of concerns toward employment over inflation. With official data delayed by a federal shutdown, Powell noted the broader outlook for jobs and prices isn't much changed since September's first cut, but the takeaway for markets is loud and clear. Analysts expect quarter-point trims at the Fed's October and December meetings, lowering borrowing costs for households and businesses. In short, the central bank seems poised to play defense on jobs, cutting rates to keep Main Street from feeling the full-court press. Stellantis is putting the pedal to the metal and the money where the motors are. The automaker announced a record $13 billion U.S. investment over 4 years, revving up plans to boost domestic production by 50% and add more than 5,000 jobs. Funds will flow to plants in Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and Indiana, with 5 new models launching and 19 getting upgrades through 2029. The company will reopen Belvidere, Illinois, to build 2 new Jeep models, creating roughly 300 jobs starting in 2027, and schedule new production in Toledo and Warren in 2028 and Detroit in 2029. CEO Antonio Filosa says the move strengthens the company's U.S. footprint, an onshoring shift that could steer around tariff potholes on imports from Canada and Mexico. SpaceX's 11th Starship test took off without a hitch and splashed down with a swish. The Super Heavy booster executed a soft landing in the Gulf of Mexico, while the upper stage flew a suborbital arc, deployed 8 Starlink simulators, relit an engine, and concluded with a precise splashdown in the Indian Ocean. The mission, billed as the finale for the second-generation Starship, delivered a data bonanza on heat shield performance, and a new landing burn technique, fuel for the next iteration and a boost for NASA's Artemis program, targeting a lunar South Pole landing in mid-2027. Acting NASA Administrator Sean Duffy called it another major step, proof that after early stumbles, Starship is learning to stick the landing, one giant leap at a time. A cryptocurrency caper meets a courtroom crackdown. U.S. authorities charged Chen Ji, chairman of Cambodia's Prince Holding Group, in an alleged pig butchering scam that prosecutors say used forced labor to swindle victims of billions. In a historic forfeiture, the U.S. seized about 271 bitcoins, valued north of $14 billion. The indictment alleges trafficked workers were coerced into luring targets into fake crypto investments, with proceeds funding yachts, jets, and fine art. Treasury labeled the conglomerate a transnational criminal organization and, with the UK, sanctioned Chen and the company. Officials say scams tied to Southeast Asia cost Americans at least $10 billion last year. Chen, also known as Vincent, remains at large. And in Los Angeles County, a state of emergency over federal immigration raids. Supervisors voted 4-1 to unlock faster aid, legal services, rent relief, and expedited contracting for families disrupted by enforcement actions. Supporters say the move stabilizes communities. Critics argue it stretches the definition of an emergency and invites legal challenges. A temporary eviction moratorium could be considered later, but would require a separate vote. The declaration stands until the board calls time. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.